The invisible passenger. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Mark pulled his taxi over to the curb. The streets were deserted except for the occasional flickering streetlight and the distant hum of the city that never truly slept. He had been driving for hours, picking up drunks from bars, tired workers heading home, and the occasional night owl with nowhere to be. But something about this night felt different. As he checked his phone for any new ride requests, he noticed a figure standing a few feet away from the street lamp. The person wasn't waving or making any gesture, but something compelled Mark to roll down his window. "Need a ride?" he called out. The figure stepped closer. It was a man in a dark coat, his face shadowed by the brim of a hat. His voice was low and measured. "Yes, Maplewood Cemetery." Mark hesitated for a split second. The cemetery was on the outskirts of town, not a typical destination this late at night. But a fare was a fare. He nodded. "Hop in." The passenger slid into the back seat. Mark adjusted his mirror but couldn't see much of the man's face. It was as if the darkness clung to him. He shrugged off the unease and started driving. The trip was silent. No small talk, no questions. Just the occasional streetlight illuminating the car's interior for a fleeting moment before plunging it back into darkness. Mark found himself gripping the wheel a little tighter. He stole glances at the mirror, but each time the passenger's face was just out of sight, either obscured by the shadows or turned slightly away. Halfway there, the temperature inside the car dropped. Mark shivered and turned up the heat, but it did little to dispel the sudden chill. "You live around here?" he asked, trying to break the silence. The man didn't answer immediately. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, he said, "I used to." Mark let out a nervous chuckle. "Got family waiting for you?" This time, the answer was even quieter. "Not anymore." Mark felt a cold prickle at the back of his neck. He glanced in the mirror again. Still, the passenger sat unmoving, his head slightly tilted down. The GPS indicated they were 5 minutes away from Maplewood Cemetery. Mark swallowed hard. He had driven past the cemetery plenty of times, but never had a reason to stop there. It was old, overgrown, and many of the tombstones had crumbled with age. It had been abandoned for decades, yet people still claimed to see strange lights flickering among the graves. "Almost there," Mark said, his voice coming out shakier than he intended. As he turned onto the long road leading up to the cemetery gates, his headlights illuminated the tall iron bars. They were rusted and locked, vines creeping around them like fingers trying to pull them closed. He slowed the car to a stop. "This is as far as I can take you," Mark said, turning to face his passenger. The seat was empty. His heart pounded. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and checked the floor. Nothing. He whipped around to stare into the rearview mirror and froze. The passenger was still there. Mark's breath hitched. The man's face was now visible, pale and sunken, his eyes hollow and staring directly into the mirror. A slow, unnatural smile crept onto his lips. Mark's hands trembled as he turned to look back, empty. He snapped his gaze back to the mirror. The passenger was still there, grinning wider now, his teeth too white, too sharp. "Thank you for the ride," the voice whispered directly into Mark's ear. Mark screamed. He slammed the car into gear and peeled away from the cemetery, tires screeching against the asphalt. The cold in the car was unbearable now, suffocating, pressing against his skin like unseen hands. His breath came in ragged gasps as he sped through the empty streets, not daring to look at the mirror again. Finally, he reached a well-lit intersection and skidded to a stop. He sucked in deep breaths, his hands still shaking. Slowly, he forced himself to look up. The mirror reflected only his own panicked face. Relief washed over him in waves. He let out a nervous laugh, rubbing his hands over his face. "Jesus," he muttered. "I need a break." Then his phone buzzed with a new ride request. He hesitated before glancing down at the screen. Pickup location, Maplewood Cemetery.